Good morning. Welcome to this edition of the Richard Urban Show, where we present news and views from God's point of view. I'm your host, Richard Urban. Today, we're very happy to have Steve Harris on. He's running for Sheriff of Jefferson County. So please introduce yourself.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Urban, for this opportunity to speak to your listeners. My name is Steve Harris, and I'm a candidate for Jefferson County Sheriff. I'm a native born and raised West Virginia candidate, and my wife and I first moved to Jefferson County back in 1990. I am a retired law enforcement professional, and I am the candidate with the most total years of experience, as well as the most years of experience in a variety of specialty skills. I'm also a constitutional candidate for sheriff, which means that I will protect citizens' constitutional rights to and including the Second Amendment. The sheriff of Jefferson County must be professional, fair, honest, and have integrity, all of which are the backbone of my candidacy. The sheriff must be friendly, approachable with the residents. The sheriff also must have a responsibility to be a role model for our youth, setting an example and uplifting the law enforcement profession as a whole. What I bring to the table, different from every other candidate running for sheriff, is an understanding and knowledge of other ways to do things other than the same old, same old. I am that candidate that is ready to take the reins of the job from day one, which includes the treasurer's position. Therefore, I ask for your support and your vote in becoming the next sheriff on June 9th. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned, let's see, you've been in the county since 1990. And I know you had quite a bit of experience in different counties, like in Prince George's County and other places. So what prompted you? What are the main reasons, or three main reasons you're running, like at this time? What prompted you to run right now?
Well, the biggest thing that one of the biggest areas that I have a problem with is the erosion between law enforcement and the community. That has bothered me. I was born back in Harrison County, West Virginia. I always had the utmost respect for law enforcement. There was a lot of communication. Back then, it was much different. You didn't have all the patrols inside of a cruiser that you do now. Basically, that was the very beginning of community policing, and we didn't know it. So my thing is, I want to restore the communication, the understanding, and the support of the community along with law enforcement. We need to be a partner in this fight against crime. It's not a one-man job. It's the entire community. And one of my things within my plans within my community policing is that as the sheriff, I will get out into the community, come to you, get out of my chair at that office, come out to you, and meet with you in your community. And I will ask you, what's the problems? And we'll have real discussion of what the problems have been in the past, what the problems are today, and what we see as the roles to fix it for tomorrow.
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, okay, I live up here in Shannondale, and we don't see anybody around. Not that that's bad necessarily, as far as
Right.
the patrols. And
Right.
but so how would this work? Like I'd say in Shannondale, for instance, how would this kind of liaisoning work? What would you do?
Well, I would find somebody within the community itself to act as a direct liaison between me and the community itself. Whether that's a person that would step forward to want to do that, or the people of Shannondale say, hey, let's get behind this guy or this lady and see if they will step up and be a partner with the sheriff, and to ensure that we need to get the things done in Shannondale that we want. I live in Shannondale. I know exactly what you're talking about. We don't see the patrols up here the way we should. There's a lot of issues up here that I wish were different than they are. For instance, the Blue Ridge, the substation out there by Blue Ridge Elementary School. I remember when that was put up there, and I remember what it was supposed to be and how it was supposed to be manned. It's none of that. They're not meeting their obligation to the residents up here on this mountain, and that will change with me. Whether I have to man it with reserves or whatever, it will get manned, and there will be somebody there that residents can come and talk to, residents can seek assistance from, and if they just want to come in and have a cup of coffee, it'll be there for them.
Okay.
But one thing that we have here is the deputies are scattered all over this county. and not to make it like I'm putting all this on the deputies aren't doing their job, because that's not the fact. One of the things is the manpower situation. We are 11 deputies behind what the federal mandate is per population. And under my administration, I will work very hard to get the funds from the county to bring that manpower level up. I know it can't be done the first year. It won't be done the second year. But over a 4-year term, I hope to have it up as much as possible to meet that mandate. I will also go out and attract money from the federal government, from the state government, as well as organizations like the National Sheriff's Association, the Fraternal Order of Police. There's a number of ways that we can fund manpower. The other thing that we have in this county is so many times our deputies are scattered all over the place, or all of them are sitting in one end of the county. That won't happen with me as sheriff. We will have a beat structure, and this will be a set part of the beat. One thing I do have a past in is community policing.
Okay.
We spoke
well,
on
let me
that
interject
lightly.
one thing there, just
Yes.
on that topic. So we're talking about like budget constraints, or so how, like, actually one of the things I've written down is to ask you like how much staffing is needed. So you said it's 11 deputies. That sounds like quite how many deputies are there like overall, or is that way short? And what, like, do we need to the county is like historically underfunding, or give me a little insight on that, please.
Well, yeah, historically it has been underfunded. For whatever reason, the county commission has not placed that money or the emphasis on public safety, in my idea, the way that they should have. I hope that that changes. We're about to have elections of county commissioners here very soon as well. There are some county commissioners that are very supportive, understanding that they have a budget restraint that they have to try to stay under. But they are also supportive of the public safety community. So that's been one of the problems that we've faced. What the reason behind that is, I'm not sure if it's financial or whatever, but we certainly have to try to do a better job of that.
Okay. One other related question. I was wondering, like, I know the sheriff's office collects the taxes, like property taxes.
Yes.
So what percentage, like, of the resources does that take? You know, is it 10%, 25%, 50%? Do you have any idea?
Well, the percentage of the actual, as far as the deputy
budget,
manpower,
like the
budget, well, we have an entire department dedicated. I do have the actual figures on what it costs to operate the tax department. Prior to me running, and I was still considering running way back in the pre-candidacy stage, I went in and I sent a letter to Sheriff Daugherty asking him for a meeting to come in and sit down, not a complaint session, but a session just to simply tell him who I was, my concerns, and ask him for his input on certain questions that I had. And he was very gracious. He not only gave me an hour, he gave me 2 hours. The one thing that I learned from that is what his functions are with the treasurer's department, or the treasurer aspect of the job. And to be very honest with you, we have an incredible tax department. It's run by an extremely knowledgeable chief tax deputy who does an excellent job. The tax deputies do an excellent job. But what he gave me at that time was a breakdown of the budget for the past 3 years. Now, he certainly this year here was a new budget. So I didn't have the figures on that. He didn't have the figures on that to give to me at that time. He ran in and asked, I believe it was for 10 deputies, several more vehicles, and quite a bit of an increase, not only in the manpower, but other areas of the sheriff's department as well. So I can find those figures if you want me to dig them up here and tell you what it costs to actually run the tax department. But I would say that the figures are well in line with what they should be.
Okay, it sounds like that would take a little more research. Well, to switch the issue, I noticed on your materials you were saying you wouldn't enforce any like unconstitutional like red flag laws or Second Amendment type laws.
Correct.
Like that, should they ever be passed. Is that right?
That's correct. And I hold that to everybody out there can hold me to that. That is a promise by me. You know, there are a number of counties, or not so much counties within our state, but counties surrounding us that have put those kind of laws on the books, and cities. I don't see that happening right now here in West Virginia. I know there's a push for it, but as the county sheriff, I'm a constitutional officer. My obligation is not only to enforce the laws of our state and our county and our country, but is also to ensure that people's constitutional rights are not violated. Now, you know, there's conversation as to whether or not, the governor, that was an unconstitutional act and this and that. The law enforcement as a whole, whether you're a sheriff, a deputy sheriff, a state trooper, a city police officer, there's a lot of discretion in law enforcement. And it's a lot of times it's up to the leader of that particular agency to determine what discretion gets used. We recently here in Jefferson County had 2 areas that were shut down under what they said the sheriff's department shut them down under what they thought was the governor's order. I would not have shut those 2 places down. And I'll tell you why. The reason is because you could have gone into those situations knowing the COVID-19 problem that we have, and you could have put in play situations where those people could have done social distancing while still being able to operate. The sad thing of all this is,
well, I'm sorry, let me interject. I guess I'm
okay.
I didn't see that or know about that. So those were like business closures of a restaurant or a small business, or what was that?
Well, one had to do with a range, a weapons range where people could go and shoot.
Oh,
And
okay.
the other one had to do with a golf course. Excuse me. I apologize. Allergies, as you know, up here on the mountain
Yes.
are extremely high, and I'm one of the victims of it. So, but those were the 2 businesses that I spoke of particular. They were in the paper. There were a lot of people up in arms about why those were shut. As the sheriff, even though the whether or not the order by the governor is constitutional or not, depended on what people felt. I would not have shut those businesses down. I would have sent the deputies out there, or I would have gone out there myself when I received complaints or the knowledge if they were still operating. I would have gone out and had a discussion with those business owners and said, look, I'm as pro-business as anybody in this world. And I know that there's a lot of business out here that this shutting down is not only going to hurt their business, it's going to kill their business. It's going to affect their personal lives. So let's figure up a plan here together so that you can continue to operate under the social distancing laws and the plans that we have in effect, and not put you in a bind that is going to cause a spread of this COVID-19, and it's also not going to put you in a financial bind as well.
Okay. I saw some discussion. I think it was on one of the Facebook groups. Someone's asking you about that. You gave a little, maybe, okay, correct or clarify for me. A little different answer. They were asking you about the different mandates, and they're saying that you thought maybe they were enforceable. Or do you know what I'm talking about, or am I?
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm aware. I think what you're talking about is somebody come out and made in their statement that they made to me. I have studied constitutional law. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not a judge. I'm not a lawyer.
Right.
But there was a point in time in my education part of my life that I did study law and had considered becoming a lawyer. That changed over the years. But one of the courses that I took, and then which led me to multiple courses, was United States constitutional law. So to some degree, having studied constitutional law, I understand that before I am going to say something is constitutional or unconstitutional, I'm going to research it. This particular person, if I'm not mistaken, if this is who you are talking about.
Yeah, I don't remember the name or anything. I just saw some discussion.
I don't either. They made the point that what's your opinion on this unconstitutional closing of businesses by the government? Anytime somebody throws and there's something on voice or speech and something else, anytime somebody says that their constitutional infringement or it's unconstitutional, I go back into the mindset that, hey, this has been ruled by the United States Supreme Court as constitutional. So that was my answer. I was, at the time when I answered that question, I was answering a constitutional issue. If you're going to say something's unconstitutional, then have the backing to say that it's unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court or the Constitution itself. So that was the issue on that.
Okay.
And once
All right.
again, on those business, had they asked me, if there was another person who asked me generally the same question, but asked it, what would you have done in these particular type instances under the governor's order about closing these businesses? They didn't say it was unconstitutional. They didn't say that their constitutional rights had been infringed upon. And I told them, I said, what I would have done under those situations was exactly what I said to you about the golf course and the weapons range.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're talking about discretion. I mean, I was down at the Molten Park on Memorial Day, and I mean, people, it's supposedly it's closed. People were enjoying the park. Obviously, I was glad to see there weren't any officers there arresting people. However, all the picnic tables were removed. So it's like, oh my God. So the point is, I think there is discretion. Like somebody decided, people shouldn't congregate in the park. Well, if you took it to an extreme, the sheriff could say, hey, we're going to enforce it. We're going to go down to the park and arrest the people who are congregating. I mean, where I'm going with this?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think that serves a purpose. I just don't see going out and locking people up because they went to the park. And I don't think that's what the governor of our state or any state truly wanted to have happen. If you had officers out there, just simply ask the people, look, can you please keep at least 6 foot between you? You approach it from a different aspect. You don't go out there and go locking people up for this stuff. It's one thing now if somebody is just blatantly doing something. They're not keeping distance between people. They're not wearing masks. They're not doing anything at all to stop the spread of COVID-19. Then sometimes your hands get tied. But I don't think going out and closing somebody's business down. You can even turn it over to the health department in some of these cases if it's a health department issue. But it's important, I think, for the sheriff to use that discretion. You're a leader of a department. You're a leader of men and women, and the way you do that says a lot, not only to the people within your department, but it also says a lot to the people in your community.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the way I'd approach those things.
Yeah. Well, and this week came up that situation in Minneapolis where the man was killed by apparently excessive force by the officer, and who's been apparently has a bad record over in that area. So along those lines, like, I don't know. I mean, you want the respect for the, deputies, and certainly, people should give that. But what would you do? Like, I guess it's kind of a rhetorical question, but, like that situation, there seems to be like the officer in question had a bad record, but he was still on the force. I don't know.
Yeah.
Give a comment if you want about it or not. It's up,
Well, I'm not familiar with the particular case that you're talking about.
The one where the officer, some guy was apparently involved in some. They said maybe it's passing a bad check or something. Anyways, arrested, and the officer put his knee on his neck for 5 minutes, and the guy died.
The Minneapolis
Yeah,
situation.
Minneapolis, Minnesota, not locally. But the point is, it's a police community relations thing.
Oh, it's a disaster. They had the fires up there. They had the precincts being set on fire. And a lot of that could have been avoided. Training of your officers is very important. There's one of the rules that I will throw out there, and you may have seen it on some of my web posts. You may have seen it in my brochures or my website. And this is a hard, fast rule. When I trained rookies as a field training officer on the police department, the very first thing that I would say to them when they got into my patrol car was, you treat people the way that you would want to be treated, or you would want your family to be treated. That's the number one rule. When I take office, if hopefully I'm lucky enough and blessed enough to receive that endorsement by this community, That's my number one thing I'm going to say. The first day when I'm on the job, I will pull my people together and say, here is my golden rule. You treat people the way you want to be treated, the way that you would want your family to be treated. And then that follows. Everything from there just falls into place. The training for these officers needs to be more in tune. This officer here, not knowing his record for sure, certainly sometimes there are officers that get a bad rap, and I've seen it, that they didn't deserve the name that they got. So I don't know his particular record. However, I will tell you that situation in Minneapolis, I would have been fumed if I would have seen that as the chief of police or as the sheriff of the county. If that happened, that person's going to be gone, and there's no excuse for that. In my view, that person there at that time was subdued. There was no reason to keep that person on the ground, from what I can tell, because the video certainly doesn't give me all angles of what took place. I don't know what took place prior to it, but from what I saw that's been shown on the news, that man should have been let back up off the ground. He was handcuffed and should have been placed into a patrol car. And that would have stopped that situation right there.
Right. Yeah, that's a bad situation. Okay. Well, when you compare your candidacy to like your opponent, I know you have an opponent in the,
Yes.
Mr. Hansen in the primary. What's
Yes.
different? Why should we choose you versus, your opponent?
Well, I'll start right off with Shenandoah. I have been a long time a person that has endorsed another way off of this mountain. My opponent now says that he supports another way off of this mountain as well. I was the one, I pushed that. When my wife and I we're in our second home here, by the way, in Shenandoah. We live off of Gate 1, but our first home was up off of Gate 4. My wife and I stood out there on our front deck and watched the wildfire across the mountain, coming across that mountain from the Virginia side, coming down toward the Shenandoah Club and Lake. That was a pretty scary situation. Every year while we lived up there, to the back of us was state parkland, and every hunting season, we would have the fire trucks up there back in the woods trying to put out fires from folks who would be back there hunting and throwing their cigarettes down. So sadly, but it's a fact, if we have a major disaster or a major fire up here, there are people at some point that are trapped and cannot get off of this mountain. I don't want that to be a fact. I view public safety as just that, public safety. I have a responsibility to everybody in this county to ensure that they are provided as much safety from the department as well as from means of safety of getting in and out of their communities in case of a disaster as possible. The other part
So
of
let
it
me,
is,
my mic. So maybe listen, but yeah, right. So that would be, for instance, I've talked to some of the neighbors about it since I'm also in Shenandoah, like putting through Mission Road perhaps to the Virginia side, something like that, right?
that, or even I'm not above the consideration for a bridge across the river. Now, certainly, that's something that I don't have the power to do. But I, as a political force within the county, I think that I do have the obligation to the people of Shenandoah, not only just as a resident, but if I elected their sheriff, as their sheriff, to ensure that there's another way off this mountain.
Have you done any, like, I'm sorry to interrupt, any work on this, like talking to county officials? Do they say, and if so, do they say anything about like, oh, we don't have money, or there's some legal problem, or what?
No, I have talked about it with people that are political candidates. I have not talked about it to people that are current county commissioners. However, there are people that sat on that commission in the past that were involved in politics here in the past that I have spoken to over the years about that problem. One of the situations, obviously, is funding. But we also, right now, our school buses and our deputy sheriffs have to go into Virginia in order to come back into parts of West Virginia. That's something we need to take a good look at. We don't need to be going into the state of Virginia to come back into our own state and handle our children being able to go to and from school,
Mhm.
or our deputy sheriffs handling people's requests for police services.
Okay,
The
well,
other part,
go ahead. Go ahead with your,
uh,
like, you're talking about
I,
how you're different from
exactly.
Mr. Hanson. Go
My,
ahead.
my opponent likes to make an issue of the fact that he's been a deputy sheriff for 20 plus years here in Jefferson County.
Mm.
I was not a deputy sheriff for 20 some years. I have 40 years of experience, but not as a deputy sheriff in Jefferson County. I did work for Berkeley County after I retired the first time for 2 years as a court bailiff. I grew up here in West Virginia, so I understand West Virginia law enforcement, having a cousin that was a deputy sheriff and having the county sheriff, one of the best friends of our family that was like an uncle to me as I grew up. I have worked alongside and been best friends. I've ridden with the Blue Knights Association, which is here in West Virginia, which is all made up of law enforcement people. Um, so what I bring to the table different is that I bring here not only an understanding of West Virginia law enforcement, I also bring an understanding of other ways to get things done instead of the same old things that the way it has been. If my opponent, who in fact likes to claim that he was either the number one or number two guy at times under the sheriff, if there was those issues that he wanted to get done, he certainly had the opportunity while he was a deputy sheriff to intervene and take care of some of those situations. I don't see him having done that. The big difference to me between me and him is the way I think, are seen within the community. I certainly care about the way my image. I care about the law enforcement profession. I like to talk with people, have conversation with them, and I am not seen as a person of arrogance or bullying, and I don't ever want to be seen that way. I'm the same. I'll be the same guy as your sheriff that I am sitting here right now. But I think our experience level is the main difference. I've got a lot of experience in a lot of different fields, and my experience level comes from multiple states, not just from Jefferson County, West Virginia.
Okay, that's fair enough. All right, as we're drawing to a close, anything else you'd like to share with the voters as they're approaching June 9th? Or I know some people may have already early voted, but anyway, go ahead.
Well, I would just simply ask them to keep in touch with me on Facebook or my email. I got to be very honest with you. Here this past week, I've just been, and I'm not upset about it. I've been overwhelmed with emails and requests for me to bring signs to people. I got a great request yesterday in an email for me to put one of my big signs right down in somebody's yard. So I certainly am going to do that. It's along a main route here in the county.
Okay.
I think if people could check into my webpage, and that's Steve Harris for sheriff2020.com. They can check into my Facebook page, which is Steve Harris for Jefferson County Sheriff, and my email and all that's listed right on all those spots.
Okay.
I would just simply say that I feel that I'm the absolute best candidate for this job. I'm concerned about the drug problem in this county, and I have drug investigator experience. I've got a grandson that still goes to the school. My kids grew up going to these schools. We need to give them a safe place to go to school, a safe place to live, and I'm the man to do that job.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. So everyone do vote on June 9th. Also, we've got like 3 Supreme Court justices will be elected then, and the magistrates, and of course all the primaries on both sides. So yeah, I am your host, Richard Irvin. Thank you for joining us today. Do be blessed, and we will see you next time.